Welcome to the orientation session on Adobe Connect Pro. My name is Valerie Mackenzie. I've been giving online classes for a little over 11 years. I'm going to be giving you a little bit of an orientation on how Adobe Connect Pro works, what to do when it doesn't, and the ways that you can communicate with your teacher in order for it to basically work out. So to begin with Adobe Connect Pro, you don't have to install anything per se. Most of the time it does it automatically. What ends up happening is you will receive a link, and on that, when you click on the link, it will open Adobe Connect Pro. Sometimes there's some computers that need some plugins. If you're having issues connecting to the class, it's a question of talking to the administration. Once everything's set up, it's just a question of clicking on the link and the link will open. You can open that link at any time. You don't have to wait for your class time. The second you have the link, you can go in and you can see what the online classroom looks like. The online classroom will look similar to what you have on your screen. Keep in mind that everything is movable, so depending on your teacher's preferences, you might have a bigger camera. On my side, I hadn't put it big. You might have a bigger camera, you might have a smaller camera. You might have a camera for like freezes like mine just did. So I'm going to reboot that. As I said, the teacher might organize the screen a little bit differently. This is where your virtual classes will take place. Unless otherwise mentioned from your teacher, your classes would be normally at the same time. Again, verify your emails, make sure with your teacher that that is what's going on. Adobe Connect Pro is widely used in different fields. It is used a lot in online education at LaSalle College. It is used on online education. There is an online school. That being said, keep in mind that Adobe Connect does not belong to the school. You are getting onto a server that belongs to Adobe Connect Pro. So if your class is at a specific time, let's say your class is at 6 o'clock, getting on the class at 6 o'clock might not be the best idea because there's going to be a lot of people getting on the same server at the same time, and not just from the school. So it's always a good idea to try and come a little bit earlier to get on the server and to make sure that everything is functioning properly. Adobe Connect Pro enables individuals and groups to attend virtual classes in real time provided there's an internet connection. You do need an internet connection. Online courses are like traditional courses. They are live, they are at a certain time, they last a certain amount of time. It is not recorded pods or modules like you're watching right now. Right now this has been recorded for you. In a virtual class it is recorded, but your participation is needed, and it's a regular class. It's just done online. So to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty, first I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between a virtual class and a traditional classroom. In a traditional classroom, your teacher will see your face. They will see your expression, they'll see your body language, they'll see whether you're falling asleep, whether you're bored, whether you're excited, whether you're concentrated on what she's saying, whether you are very much concentrating on what's going on in the class, or whether you find it boring. Now, a lot of that is not verbal. It's just a question of the way that you hold yourself. And teachers, especially the good ones, and we have a lot of good ones, will adjust the way that they're teaching in a traditional classroom in order to adjust for what's going on from what they see with body language. On an online class, your teacher will not be able to see you. In certain circumstances, she can give you a mic and you can talk and you'll be able to communicate using your voice with a microphone, but she will not be able to see, or he will not be able to see the body movements, your expressions, and so forth. So with an online class, you have to make a little bit of an adjustment, and you have to give as much feedback as possible. The more feedback that you give to your teacher, the more that they'll be able to continue to adjust the class to make it interesting, to make it dynamic. It is encouraged. It's very difficult to interrupt an online teacher because even if you start tapping away in the chat, well, you're not interrupting the teacher. So usually your teacher is going to encourage you to write in the chat and to communicate. Now, Adobe Connect Pro has a whole slew of tools that you can use to communicate with your teacher. Basically, let your teacher know if you're interested, if you're not interested, if you have a question, the same way that you would in a traditional classroom, but probably try and do it a little bit more. So the ways that we can communicate in Adobe Connect Pro, the first and probably the most important is the chat. Now the chat down on the bottom of the screen says chat everyone. You can type in there, usually you type in there from the beginning, so I can write good evening. You can also, if you click on the top right hand corner of that pod, if you click in it, you have certain options. So you can change the color of your text. You can, hold on a sec, I'm going to make myself blue. And sometimes that can help to follow the chat if you're not used to the chat, because if everybody in your class starts talking at the same time, it might be difficult to see who writes what if everything's in black. So sometimes changing the color of your text can actually help you to follow along with what's going on in the chat. The second method of communication is going to be usually, well, I'm going to pick one because they both kind of work, is going to be having to do with the symbols. Now on the very top of your screen you should have, well, a sec, I didn't pull out my little thing. Your teacher will be able to scribble all over the presentations. So I'm going to grab a little cursor here. So you have a little dude that's at the top of the screen with his hand in the air. Right beside him there's an arrow. If you click on that arrow, you can select any of the symbols that are below. Now what these symbols will do is that when you choose one, it will appear beside your name in the participation pod, in the attendee list, excuse me. So in the attendees list beside your name, you will have a symbol that appears. I'm going to put a green check mark. So I put a green check mark. It'll signal something. Okay, now when I'm saying it'll signal something, it means your teacher may ask you, does everybody understand? Please give me a green check mark. Or when they first share something, they'll ask, well, can you please give me a red X if you don't see something? Now, the red X and the green check mark are probably what's going to be used the most, and they stay on the screen. In other words, unless your teacher asks you for another symbol, they will stay on your screen until you change it or until you clear your status. So at the bottom of that same menu, you have the option to clear your status. I'm not doing this list in order, as you can see, but I will get to all of them, I promise. So the next one that I'm going to talk about is step away. Now again, this is a virtual classroom. The teacher does not see you if you have to go for a potty break, if your baby is crying, if your husband is crying, if your dog is crying and wants to go pee, whatever, okay? If you have to leave from in front of your screen for one reason or another, it's polite for your teacher to know that you're not there, because otherwise they don't know. So you put your status to stepped away. Now I can't demonstrate that during this video because if I put my status to step away, I'll lose my mic and my camera and everything else. So we're not going to go there. But the step away status is important to step back in once you come back to your screen. But the step away is a courtesy for your teacher, so if she asks a question and you don't answer, well, she'll know it's because you're not in front of your screen. Now keep in mind, absences and being late and so on and so forth works the exact same way as the traditional classrooms. So you can't just get into class but step away and then come back 5 minutes before the end. Your teacher may have an issue with that. So the stepped away is more often than not a courtesy to let your teacher know, hey, I'm not there. The first one on the list, the one that I skipped at the beginning, is called raise your hand. Now, whether or not your teacher in the class that you're having currently wants you to raise your hand or not, or just make it clear that you have something to say, is a little bit different on a virtual class. In Adobe Connect Pro, when you raise your hand, what happens on your teacher's end of the thing? They get this big window that pops up, and they have two options. They have the option of giving you the microphone, so allowing you to speak on your mic, or picking this big red X that says ignore. Most teachers don't like to click on that big red X that says ignore. It depends, again, how your teacher is going to manage Adobe Connect Pro, because there's several different ways of using it. Now that being said, most of your teachers would actually prefer you writing in the chat if you have a question. Again, you cannot really interrupt your teacher on an online class. Raising your hand, on the other hand, the only thing that she has, or he has, as an option is to give you the microphone. If you want the microphone, you can always ask directly for the microphone. But keep in mind, if you just have a question and you don't want to interrupt the teacher, it's just you won't interrupt the teacher by writing in the chat. So it's going to have to do a little bit with the way that your teacher manages their course. But either way, if you write something in the chat, everybody's going to be adjusting in this period right now, so I don't think that there's going to be any issues of asking directly your teacher either for the mic or how they want it to work. The symbols that are below are less used. First of all, if you use the laughter and the applause, I can guarantee you'll have your teachers blushing. Um, I'm not going to say most of them because I don't know most of them, but I'm going to say a good portion of the teachers that are going to be teaching online in the next, possibly, in the next coming weeks. Uh, the laughter and the applause, they know what it is, and they'll probably blush because they're not used to being on camera. So it might actually be fun to do that just to have some fun. Now, don't tell the administration I said that. That being said, when it comes to the other four symbols, when it's speak louder, speak softer, your teacher will have done the setup of their microphone. That is the sound that they are at. If everybody in the class cannot hear the teacher, that's an issue. So if you can't hear the teacher, or if your teacher's voice is really, really loud, mention it in the chat. If everybody in the class says we can't hear you, at that point the teacher does have the tools in order to fix the issue. Usually just a question of leaving and coming back or turning down the volume of their microphone. That being said, usually it's halfway. So if it's a question of you're the only one that you can't hear the teacher, or the teacher is very, very loud, or the teacher you can only hear it softly, at that point when it's just you, in other words, you write, I can hardly hear you, and everybody goes, no, the sound's okay. If it's just you, it's a question of adjusting your own volume, because usually the teacher is going to have a mic at 50%. Therefore, it kind of allows people to put it louder or to put it less loud. So the speaking louder and speaking softer is usually a question of setting or adjusting the volume on your computer. When it comes to speed up, speed down, that's also going to depend on the character of your teacher. There's some teachers that talk very fast. There's some teachers that talk very slow. It's a question of discussing it. Keep in mind that those icons, when they were beside your name, are really small. And to remember that the rabbit is speed up and the turtle is slow down can be a little bit confusing. Might be a little bit of a better solution to type in the chat. Could you repeat that, please? Or I think most of us understand this. Can we move on, or something to that effect? Always in a polite way, obviously. So these are the ways, or two ways, to communicate. I'm going to show you others. So the first one, the chat. The second one, the symbols. Most of the time it's going to be asked for as you go through. In other words, give me a green X, or can I have give me a red X? Yeah, or give me a green check mark, or so on and so forth. It's very important to understand that when you come into the class, you should automatically have a symbol that looks like this, that is somewhere up here. Now, it's going to depend, well, actually, we're not in Adobe Connect Pro, but it's going to be on the top left-hand side of your screen. And that symbol is the symbol for speakers. Symbol for speakers means that you are receiving sound. If that symbol is not green, it means that your speakers are not working. So we're going to talk about what happens with your speakers not working in a couple of seconds. So these are the two main communication methods. The third communication method, which is probably the funnest, but is probably the one that takes a little bit the most getting used to out of the three methods, is using the microphone. Now, it is completely normal that the first time you come into class, you will not be able to turn on your mic. It's normal. In order for you to be able to speak on the microphone, your teacher has to give it to you. When I say give it to you, it means that they will do something on their computer that will put a little icon beside your name, and then up above, you will gain a button that looks like this. Now this button, if you click on the little arrow that's beside it, will give you the option to connect your microphone or connect my audio. Now that's how you turn on the microphone, and at which point you go, hello, is there anybody there? That being said, when you turn on your microphone, it's possible that your teacher is not going to be able to hear you. There's the first time you use your microphone, sometimes there's some adjustments to do, putting up your volume, putting down your volume. We're going to talk about all of that, what happens when this happens. But the microphone, there are a lot of people that are going to have different setups. You could have a laptop, you could have a desktop, you can have a tablet. We're going to talk about all those different ways, different things that you could have. The best thing that you could have is this. Now, the reason that this is the best thing that you can have is that if you have a mic that is separate from speakers, so you have a mic here and you have like speakers over here, or if you have a microphone and speakers that are integrated into a laptop, or into, anyways, any other device, but that it's integrated together, what ends up happening is that as you speak into the mic, it gets picked up by the speakers. There's like when you speak, it comes out of the speakers and it goes back into the mic. So there's like an echo effect. Most of the time, you are not going to be able to use that type of system on an online course. There's too much of an echo effect. That's why this is recommended. That being said, it is necessary to have a properly installed functioning microphone for an online course. You have to be able to communicate with your teacher. It is a must. If you have a quick question, most of the time it's going to be resolved in the chat. That being said, when it's a question that's more evolved, it takes too much time in the chat. That's why we have microphones. It does take some getting used to, but don't worry, you will get used to it quite quickly. Now, before you can actually use the microphone, there's two things that you have to do. The first thing is that your microphone has to be plugged in to your computer before you come onto the link of Connect Pro. In other words, if you're on already the classroom, on the virtual classroom, and you have, you go, oh, I want to use my mic, and you take your mic and you plug it in, it will not work. Okay, your microphone will not work. Your microphone or your headset, which is the optimum way to go, has to be plugged into your computer before you go onto Adobe Connect Pro. If ever you forget, that's not the end of the world. You can just leave the link, in other words, close Adobe Connect Pro and reopen it. Well, close Adobe Connect Pro, plug in your microphone, and then reopen it. So you can always leave and come back. But you have to have your microphone plugged in when you connect to the link. That's the first thing. The second thing that you have to do before using a microphone is what's called the Audio Setup Wizard. The Audio Setup Wizard is going to be found through the Meeting menu at the top of your screen. There's a little menu called Meeting, and when you click on it, you will have the option of Audio Setup Wizard. Audio Setup Wizard is going to take you through a whole bunch of steps. It's going to ask you to talk, it's going to ask you to record, it's going to ask you if it sounds good. It's even going to do a test at the end to test the level of silence in the space that you're in order to try and buff out if there's a lot of background noise. Now, the Audio Setup Wizard, you have to be able to hear yourself. You have to be able to hear when you hear the little music. Anyways, when you do the Audio Setup Wizard, you'll hear the song. And at one point, it asks you to record. You click on the record button, you talk, and then you play it back. When you hit the playback button, you have to be able to hear yourself. If you cannot hear yourself, there's a problem with your microphone. So, again, technical issue, leave, come back, try it again. If it still doesn't work, you can communicate with the administration to see if they can help you with your technical issue. Okay, but you have to be able to hear yourself on the Audio Setup Wizard. But you follow the steps along that. Sometimes it's actually possible that your microphone is not working, but that you can hear the teacher. In that case, it's a question of telling your teacher, I don't have a microphone tonight, it's not working, and then get it fixed. You can still participate in an online class just having speakers, you just won't be able to speak other than the chat. So again, your teacher must activate or give you the mic in order for you to be able to speak. When you have the mic, you have to turn it on by going through the icon at the top of your screen by selecting Connect My Audio. When you turn on your audio, oh, that's hard to say, both icons, so for the speaker and for the microphone, should be green. If they are not green, again, technical issue, leave, come back, or try and turn them on. If they're sure that they're on and it's not turning green, leave, come back. The leave and come back is really the basic technical difficulties, because believe it or not, about 80% of the technical difficulties that you can have on Adobe Connect Pro are solved by leaving and coming back, because you end up landing on a different server or whatnot. So again, last thing about the microphone, it is obligatory to have a functioning microphone on an online course. It adds a lot to a virtual class. Otherwise, it's like you're sitting there watching a YouTube video. So you want to be able to ask questions. So again, I mentioned that Adobe Connect Pro, depending on how your teacher is going to set up their own class, their own screen, they might have, your screen might look different than what you see on your screen, might look different than what you see here, to be avoided. Now, in most cases, Wi-Fi connections should be avoided. Now, what does that mean? That means if you're on Wi-Fi because you live in an apartment building where the Wi-Fi is general throughout the building, it's understandable that you're not on directly connected to your modem. But you should be. For virtual classes, you will have less problems with sound, you'll have less problems listening to your tutor, you'll have less issues in general when you are connected directly to your modem than when you are Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, depending on how good or bad your Wi-Fi happens to be, no matter what, even if you have the best Wi-Fi, it is not going to be as good as if you're plugged into that modem. So to be avoided, again, as a plan B, it is acceptable. Use of cell phones and tablets. All right. A lot of people try and take online courses on a thing. Well, I have a screen that's like, I don't know how big it is, but it's very big in front of me, and it allows me to see the details that the teacher or that the person is presenting. When your teacher is going to present to you, they're going to present to you on their screen. Therefore, in order for you to be able to see it, you have to be able to see it. There's a big difference between a little cell phone screen and a big screen. So, first of all, when you're on a cell phone or a tablet, you're not seeing what you're supposed to be seeing. You might not be able to read all of it. You might have problems typing in it, and you usually on a cell phone or on a tablet, you may also have issues giving the different symbols, taking the mic. So basically, all the communication is lowered when you are on a cell phone or a tablet. So it's best to be on a desktop or on a laptop. Again, it's can be used as a plan B, but it really should be avoided. All right, Adobe Connect Pro works best on Chrome. In other words, what happens when you click on that link is that it should open Chrome, which then opens Adobe Connect Pro. And you'll have a little icon on the bottom of your screen. Hold on a sec. If you are on a PC, you'll have a little icon that looks like that that's in your taskbar on the bottom. So it'll land somewhere on the bottom of your screen. So it'll open it up, but it's open through Chrome. The whole thing is set up, Adobe Connect Pro, to work with Chrome. So if you're on Internet Explorer, I'm not going to make much more comments than that, or Firefox or on something else, Safari, keep in mind that it is best on Chrome. So if you're able to get Chrome, it might be the ideal solution. If you're not, well, try. I'm not saying it's not going to work on other browsers. I'm just saying the best browser to use by far is Chrome. All right, you must use a headset with a microphone. Virtual classes works best on a laptop. I started speaking before I got to my slide. Work best on a laptop or desktop computer that is directly. It's a good thing I said it better before. Can't read, I can only speak. That is connected directly to the modem, Wi-Fi only as a plan B. Ensure that you are in a calm environment which will not be interrupted. Now this is when you take the mic. Everybody is going to have different circumstances of where they're taking their online courses. For instance, if I was giving you, this is not a live class, but just give it a second. Let's say I had a hockey game. I am in Canada. Let's say I had a hockey game behind my head. I had a dog barking beside me, a baby screaming beside my lap, and my husband going, "I'm hungry, dear." I love my husband to death. No comments on that. But when you are on the microphone, it's distracting for other people when there's a lot of different sounds around. So if you can, when you're taking your online course, try and distance yourself from the noise of regular life. It'll be more calming for you. Lastly, and this, well, not lastly, but close to lastly, this is the fantastic part about virtual classes. They are recorded. So, I don't remember what the teacher said about this. You can go look. At the moment, it's not 100% ironed out of how that's going to work, but I believe that you're going to be receiving a link for the recording for the class. So you click on the link, it opens Adobe Connect Pro, at which point you will be able to see the recording for your class. And the recording is set up the exact same way as the virtual class. So the way that it works in the virtual class is you'll have a different pause, your teacher is going to put things on the screen, is going to talk to you in the chat, is going to have the webcam and the sound and all this. The recording is basically a recording of the screen during the virtual class. So your questions will be in there. If you speak, you'll be able to hear yourself. If you type in the chat, you'll be able to see it. The only thing that's not included in a virtual class recording is if you talk to if you talk to your teacher in private. Now, I didn't actually talk about how to talk to your teacher in private because you can. Keep in mind that if your teacher is in the process of giving information on the screen, might not be the best time to send your teacher a private message, but, and I'm trying to find a picture of it and I don't think I have it. There we go. I have a picture of it. you will have on every Adobe meeting a little pod that is called an attendees list. There is one currently underneath my head, and there is one also in the picture that's there. In order to talk to your teacher in private, or in order to teach to other students in private, if your teacher allows it, and I'll get into that in a second, all you have to do is hover your mouse over that person's name, and it will give you an option to start private chat. And what will happen is that at the bottom of the chat, so hold on a sec, I have to go back. I'm losing myself in my presentation. I'm sorry about that. At the bottom of the chat pod, so what you see down here, you will have a tab that's everyone, which is the open chat, and you will have a new tab that opens up for every private chat that you have. So you can have several private chats. So this is with person A and this is with person B. And you basically click on the different tabs to go from one tab to the next, from one conversation to the next. Now you will always be able to privately message your teacher. If they're a host or a presenter, it'll always be open. You can always talk to them in private. Again, if they're in the middle of a sentence, they may not answer you right on the spot. You'll see what they're doing. If they look like this, that means they're reading the messages in the private. Okay, that's usually what it looks like. The teacher has the option of turning off the private chat with students. In other words, if your teacher is not getting answers to the questions that they're asking, or whatever you're doing a test, in that case, the private chat might be turned off. So your teacher does have the control over that. We don't put people in the corner anymore. We just turn off the possibility of doing it. I am making a joke. All right. So that's when it comes to what you should and shouldn't do. Be in a calm environment. Recorded classes, one of the best things invented. So as my last, and yes, we're almost done, I hope this wasn't too painful for you. What happens with technical problems? Technical problems have a huge range, so telling you what to do in the case of a technical problem is a little difficult. Because it depends if the technical problem is getting into Adobe Connect Pro to begin with, or once you're in Adobe Connect Pro and there's a problem. So I'm going to talk about what happens in the case that you cannot get in to the link. Now, first of all, there's this little list of what to do. Okay, so disconnect and reconnect from the link, or leave and come back. Now that is a beautiful answer if you manage to get in. If you manage to get into Adobe Connect Pro and you see a screen similar to this one, at that point, if there's something wrong, leave and come back. Most of the time that fixes the problem. If you're not able to get in to the online course, there may be one of two problems. Okay, well, there might be more than two, but there's two that I'm usually aware of. The first is Chrome is the best browser to use for Adobe Connect Pro. So if you're not on Chrome, that might be one of the issues. Second is that your browser history has to be emptied. So on Chrome, you have to empty your cache, your history. Once you empty your history, you close your window, you reopen Chrome, and you re-click on the link. At that point, you should be able to get into class. Sometimes you actually have to do it more than once. It depends on the system, it depends on the evening, it depends on the link, it depends on a lot of different things. It has to do with the servers of Adobe. So it's not really having to do with the school, it's having to do with the way that your computer is talking to the server of Adobe. So if you're not able to get into class, that's the best solution that I have is really to empty your history, to empty your cache of Google Chrome, and then come into it. If neither of those things work, or if you're in Adobe Connect Pro and there's a problem, Adobe Connect Pro, if you're in the link and there's a problem, leave and come back. But any other issue, try and reboot your computer. Sometimes that fixes things just because your computer is trying to do something and you're fighting against it. Make sure everything else on your computer is off. If you have 17 different tabs on your browser and you have a couple of big programs on, your computer is going to be running hard. Test the speed of your internet connection. Sometimes the issue is that your internet connection, there's an issue with it. So if everything goes blank. If ever you're in a virtual class and the screen goes blank, in other words, you don't see, you see a teacher that looks like this. Because believe it or not, when the screen changes, when the screen freezes, when Adobe freezes a webcam, it's never going to be like this perfect pose. It's always going to be If you ever see that, sometimes it's just a question that the webcam has frozen. Okay, it happens. It happened at the beginning of this recording. If it happens, let your teacher know. 'Cause sometimes they won't even notice. But let your teacher know. They'll turn off their webcam. They'll turn it back on. If it's still redoing it, they may leave. They may come back. If they look like this and they're not talking anymore, you don't hear them speaking, it's possible that on their end, their computer is having an issue with Adobe Connect Pro. At which point they have to leave and they have to come back in order to fix the problem. Again, 80% of the time, any problem with Adobe Connect Pro can be resolved by simply closing it, closing Adobe and coming back. So if that happens, if that happens with your teacher, that it's frozen, well, write it in the chat. It's frozen, or I can't hear you, or whatever. Everybody else that's in the class is going to say, no, for me it's fine, or they're going to say, yeah, me too, you're frozen, I can't hear anything. Because it's always going to depend on whether it's one person that has an issue or everybody that has an issue. So it's to determine, is it my computer or is it your computer? Is it Adobe Connect Pro, or, well, whose fault is it? And it's not to cause any blame. It's not, nobody's going to rip off anybody's head. It's not to point the blame. It's really, how do we fix the problem? And the fixing the problem is figure out whose issue it is, and the person whose issue it is has to leave and come back. Now, the administrations are going to be setting up a lot of support for you, whether it be technical support, whether it be pedagogical support, whether it be Adobe Connect Pro support. They're setting up a whole system for this. If this comes, because at this point when I'm doing this, it's still an if this comes into effect, you will have as much support as the school could possibly give you. We are prepared for it. But the best thing to do is, once you have access to the links, get onto the links, go and test everything. You will not be able to use your mic when your teacher's not there, but you can always go into the link before class time. You can go into it the second you have the link, you can go into it. So it might identify some issues before class time. Depending on what time your class is, it's possible that the technical support is not available at that exact time. Depends where you are. There's a lot of different parts. There's a lot of moving parts going on. So knowing that there's a problem earlier rather than later is the best strategy, because at that point you'll be able to have the help that you need in order to fix it. Okay. Adobe Connect Pro in general is a program that you can really, it's user friendly. Okay, you come in, if you click, there's nothing that you can click on that will make your computer explode. Okay, so feel free to click on it. Now there's one last thing that I want to talk about. It's going, again, to depend on whether or not your teacher uses this tool. This tool can be interesting, and if ever you're in a class and your teacher is showing you something on the screen and you would really like to sit there and circle something on it or scribble on it, let's say okay, personally, I give classes in interior design specifically on technical drawing. When I'm sharing a plan on the screen, if there's somebody that doesn't understand a specific symbol on my plan, there is a way in Adobe Connect Pro for them to give you the power to draw on the screen. So this is something that is relatively new in Adobe Connect Pro, but you can mention it to your teacher and let them know that it is available in the options of the share pod that they have. In other words, that presentation in the middle of the screen, top right hand corner of that screen, they have the ability to allow you to draw on it. So it might actually be quite interesting in that regard to do it. There's also the possibility of doing a reverse screen share. In other words, it's possible that, let's say you're learning a program, well, the teacher may be sharing their program on their screen, but if you're having an issue on your computer with your program, it's possible that they ask you to share your screen on Adobe Connect. At which point it's as simple as clicking yes when it asks you permission, and your screen will come on screen. Well, you have to select that it's your desktop. But other than that, you will still have control of your mouse. The teacher will be able to point. They can then request control or not, or they can leave you the control of it. But either way, there is also the ability to do that without having a webcam or any other tools or installations. So that's about it. I hope that Adobe Connect Pro is a little less intimidating. It's a tool. It's a tool that works well most of the time. When it doesn't, leave, come back. If it still doesn't work, use the support that the school is supplying. But I'm pretty sure that it's going to go pretty good. So have an excellent day and good luck on Adobe Connect Pro.